I was 22 years old and waiting quite nervously to give a speech. It wasn't my speech, though. It was my brother James's. He was just 20 years old, but it was the last speech he would ever write because James had cancer and he was dying. My palms were sweaty, my face was flushed, my eyes were really puffy from crying the night before with my family. But none of that mattered. James had asked me to give this speech, his last speech on his behalf. And I knew in that moment I had to do that one thing to help my brother. But this isn't a sad story. It's a story about helping others and how each of us can make the world around us a little bit better. Growing up, James always had this light brown, wavy, surfer-style kind of hair and just the best smile. He was smart, kind, loving, loyal. He was my best friend and a really good brother. He also had a really great sense of humor. He would have been the first person to tell you that not many things in life came easy to him. And so from a young age, James learned the importance and the value of hard work. And most days, he worked at tennis. He had a real passion for it. He was never very athletic or coordinated, but he worked incredibly hard. When he wasn't at school, studying, spending time with our family or his close friends, he was training and practicing to be the best tennis player that he could be. And by the time he was about 12 or 13, he was quite good and on track to play tennis at a Division I college. But cancer changed everything. Just after James's 13th birthday in the summer between 7th and 8th grade, he was diagnosed with a form of pediatric bone cancer called osteosarcoma. School days were instead filled with blood work and chemotherapy appointments and surgery. Time with friends was limited based on his counts, and tennis was no longer an option because James couldn't run. Particularly in the beginning, it was hard for James to find little moments of happiness with this drastic change in his life and everything that was going on around him. But whenever he was feeling particularly down or feeling sorry for himself, my mom would always remind him that if he would look to his left and to his right, there was always somebody that had it worse than he did. And that it was our responsibility to do that one thing to help ourselves and to help others in need. And it wasn't always easy. There were good days and bad. But that's exactly what he did. When he'd be in the hospital for chemo, he would take some time and go visit other kids with cancer in their rooms and just chat, hang out, especially the ones that were there by themselves because maybe their parents were at home taking care of other children that couldn't be left alone or working 2 or 3 jobs just to afford their treatment. There was one time it was around Thanksgiving actually, and we went down to the gift shop with my cousin and we bought some fall-themed decorations and decorated a couple of the kids' rooms in the cancer ward just to, brighten up the place, bring a smile to someone else's face. It wasn't the first time. It was probably one of the more memorable moments when we really got to experience and feel what it was like to do that one thing for someone that was having a slightly worse day than we were. About a year later, just 2 months shy of his 14th birthday, James had completed his initial chemotherapy and surgery. James was cancer-free. To celebrate, my parents decided we were going to have a big blowout party, which, if you knew us before cancer, was not a thing that happened in the Ragan household. Remember I mentioned James had a good sense of humor? Well, James decided this was going to be a Monty Python Animal House-themed toga party. Everyone had a fantastic time, and in lieu of gifts as a way to give back, James decided we were going to have guests make donations to MD Anderson Children's Cancer Hospital, where he was being primarily treated, or to Driscoll Children's Hospital, our local hospital where he would go for blood work or if there was ever an emergency. It was incredible. I wish I could tell you the things that happened there that night. It was the first of many memorable toga parties, because just a few months after that first one, we learned James's cancer had metastasized or spread to his lungs, which meant that now James was terminal. There was no cure for his cancer. It became apparent pretty quickly that osteosarcoma, like most pediatric cancers, is considered an orphan disease, meaning it affects less than 200,000 people nationwide. Because it affects so few, there's not a lot of incentive for pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, or the government to put a lot of directed and focused funding towards finding new treatments and cures for these cancers. So, in 2010, James and I formalized our toga parties and other awareness events into a nonprofit organization called the Triumph Over Kid Cancer Foundation, which still exists today. TOKC's mission is to provide kids with cancer and their families hope for a better future by supporting innovative pediatric cancer research and spreading awareness throughout our communities. And then also to bring some joy to their daily life through various outreach programs and activities. James dedicated his life to TOK's mission and to helping other kids with cancer like him and families like ours. But after 7.5 years of chemotherapy, experimental treatments, radiation therapies, surgeries to his leg, his lungs, his diaphragm, and even his heart, James died at home surrounded by our family on February 17th, 2014. He was just 20 years old. I wish I could stand here today and tell you that I remember every detail of what happened in the days following James's death, but I don't. It's still all just a blur. One thing I will never forget was standing at the pulpit of the cathedral in Corpus Christi, Texas, waiting to give his eulogy and looking out to see the entire place was completely full. There was our family, friends, people I had never met or seen in my life who in one way or another had been influenced by James. In the short time he was alive, James had a lasting impact on people of all ages and walks of life. He gave them a new perspective, not just with his words, but with his actions. Particularly in the month before James died, he was really worried that he would be forgotten, that all of his hard work and advocacy would have been for nothing. But in the weeks after James's death, that could not have been further from the truth. We saw an outpouring of support from our community. People were stepping out of their comfort zones and doing what they could to help others in the community, especially kids with cancer and their families. During the time he was alive, he spoke often about the horrors of pediatric cancer, the importance of supporting research and spreading awareness and helping kids with cancer and their families on their journeys. But he chose his high school graduation speech to talk for the first time about the lessons he had learned from having cancer. The goal being, if you could learn those things without having cancer, you'd be better people for it. It was from one of those lessons that a movement was started. A movement to do that one thing to help someone in a worse situation than you are. But maybe it's better if you get to hear it from James himself.
But I can also tell you that no matter what the cost is to you personally, there is no greater feeling than helping someone who's in a bad situation who has no one else to turn to. So I recommend that as you live your life, you take time out of each week to go out of your way to do something nice for someone who's in a worse situation than you are. I can promise you, you will be stronger, more energetic, more positive, and happier throughout your life if you do that one thing.
Do that one thing. It's a simple concept, really, but it's not always easy to do. And after James died, I knew that it was my turn to step up and speak out, to honor his legacy, and to continue helping other kids with cancer like James and families like mine. In the weeks and months that followed James's death, teachers throughout South Texas played that speech on YouTube to their classes, and we saw an outpouring of support from a younger generation, some who knew James and some who didn't, but nonetheless were inspired by his words and wanted to know what they could do to help. It was out of that outpouring of support that TOKC's Do That One Thing councils were born. The initial goal was to teach high school students about civic engagement. How do you get more involved in your community? A little bit about nonprofit work, leadership skills, and to show them, most importantly, that you don't need to be an adult with a job, a degree, or even money to be a positive change maker in your community and the world around you. We recruited a group of high school juniors and seniors, many of whom had reached out to us, and we all worked really hard together to get these councils off the ground, write the bylaws, determine what was it the students wanted these councils to be. The students initiated their own awareness initiatives, wearing buttons that had a fact about pediatric cancer on their shirts or their backpacks, to spark conversation and educate their peers. They would volunteer at events TOKC hosts at our local children's hospitals, just spending time with kids with cancer, whether it be at ice cream socials or Build-A-Bear parties or arts and crafts days. They volunteered at our annual Thanksgiving dinner, serving meals to families at the hospital and organizing fun activities for kids with cancer and their siblings during the event. During Pediatric Cancer Awareness Month, the students go all out in orange at football games, basketball games, volleyball games, pep rallies. If you can think of it, the students can do it. And they choose a child with cancer and their family to honor and show a little extra love and support during the month. Some of these students have even taken TOKC and their Do That One Thing councils on with them when they've gone to college. And personally, it continues to be just so inspiring and hopeful to see the commitment a younger generation has to helping kids with cancer and their families. If the students were here, they would tell you that spending time with kids with cancer has impacted them infinitely more than they ever could have imagined. While we don't have official Do That One Thing councils at an elementary school level, we do have kids that young that want to get involved and do that one thing. Sometimes they'll raise money by selling carnations around Valentine's Day or little vouchers to get out of wearing their school uniform for the day. And these kids don't do these things because an adult tells them they have to. They do it because maybe one of their classmates or a family member or a friend has cancer, and they just want to make the world around them a better place. They want to do that one thing. And it's been these younger generations that have gone on to inspire older generations to get involved. We've got a group of adults that goes once a month to cook a meal for families staying at the Ronald McDonald House. Some of these adults have even gotten the companies they work for or own involved, hosting anything from a fishing tournament to bowling outings to a horseshoe tournament to spread awareness in their communities for pediatric cancer. It continues to be just so inspiring and humbling to see people of all ages and walks of life coming together to help kids with cancer and their families. This February will mark 9 years since James died. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't miss him, his smile, or his hugs. But James gave me a truly invaluable gift. He gave me a new perspective. He showed me, my family, our friends, our community, that through unity of purpose and great effort, we can accomplish more than we believe to be possible. And it doesn't start big. It starts small. It starts by making the conscious and thoughtful decision to take some time out of your day to do something for someone who's in a worse situation than you are. It starts by doing that one thing. Thank you.